Hello again, everyone. This is Kaz Beelan, and you're watching or listening to Casual Conversations. It's a video podcast and audio podcast where we speak to people who are very important to our world. Today, we have a very special guest who's back. Is Joe Peters, who's In the Know with Joe. Is his podcast, by the way, so check that out. You also have a newsletter. Is that correct? What is that called?
Yeah, it's if you go to jpeters.com/mr for market reports, you'll see it. You'll get a Hunterdon, a Somerset County, and a Bridgewater one comes out as well, which is one of my more popular markets.
So, Joe, thanks again for being back. We fill in people every quarter pretty much, and you're the expert in Somerset, Hunterdon County, and beyond. But in the past, we talked about real estate as a hyper-local picture. What does that mean exactly, Joe?
Well, it real estate is not the same in every town in the county, and it's not the same at every price point within a town in the county. The higher the price point, the less activity there is. The lower the price point, the more. That's pretty logical, but some areas are very, very popular, like Bridgewater, our most popular town. So if you go into in Hunterdon County, same thing. If you go into Clinton Township, the Flemington area, which is Raritan Township, very, very active. But if you get down to the Amwells, it's kind of on the outskirts. It's not as active. So as I say, it's hyper local. It depends where you're at and what price point you're at.
That doesn't mean hyper, like people get hyper when they buy or sell a house.
No, it just means minute hyper. It's a focused. That's an interesting twist on the word. No, it's not jumping up and down. Maybe it is jumping up and down, and we just don't realize it.
Like Tigger jumping up and down. Hey, so we're 3/4 of the way through 2024. All right, I can't believe it. 2025 is almost here. So, what do you see happening the rest of the year? It's going to be what do you think?
Well, it's an interesting time to be talking about this because we just got some late figures, and that's what I wanted to share with you. Market has cooled down a bit. That's what we call normalizing. By that I mean we're seeing more inventory, especially in the higher price points, and in the lower price points we're still challenged. There's nothing under 400,000, and we're still seeing fewer but improving sales overall. 2024, we lost about 3% of sales over 2023. But in 2023, we're down 18% on 2022. So it's improving. 3% less this year. And I think next year, we're going to see a lot more sales. It's getting very active. Now, the other thing to consider is what's making that happen. There's the interest rates. We're going to talk about that separately. There's inventory. We're going to talk about that separately. And then there's what the buyers can afford. And that's an interesting phenomenon because as we sit here, and since July 1st, interest has gone down 1%. We've gone down from just over 8% to just over, we're at just over 7% to just over 6%. We've gone down from 7.1 to 6.1%. In less than 2 or 3 months, and the Fed just cut the rates again. So we're going to see eventually that trickle in. It was already built in this time, so the rates didn't jump when they cut it. But I think we're going to see more cuts based on what they saw. The other thing is that inventory levels have picked up a little, and that is good for us. Hunterdon County had, for example, 643 listings before COVID started. We went all the way down to 188. That's about a third. It's less than about a quarter of what the max was in 2020, which was low to start with. We're back up to about 275. So we're bouncing back. Somerset County's similar situation. We had a little over 1,000 inventory. It went all the way down to 329. And now we're back to about 450. Overall in New Jersey, we've moved from about 10,000 houses on the market to 15,000 houses on the market. But we were over 50,000 before this all got started. So we have a long way to go. I think we're going to see another 10,000, 5 to 10,000 units come on for the next couple of years. And once we get back up to a reasonable inventory level, the craziness will stop.
So, Joe, speaking of the Fed and the interest rates, connected to the Fed, but not really supposed to be connected. But, we have something happening in November, a presidential election. So Does presidential elections, do they affect how real estate market works or not? Or what do you foresee
I
depending on who
think
gets the White House?
the presidential election has an effect on to whether they cut interest rates or not, because nobody wants to make it look political. The
Right.
Fed is supposedly not a
Yeah.
political, but I saw a couple of articles where the head of the Fed gave the Democratic Party a big boost by cutting it a half a point. Well, the prices didn't go down. I don't know where they got the boost. No, the answer outright is the election typically doesn't affect the market, but it does affect the outlook on the market, one side versus another. Our biggest problem is that things cost what they cost. Prices, for example, are up 45 to 50% since COVID. So if you had a $400,000 house in 2020, you now have a $600,000 house. That's a lot of difference. We typically have gone up 5% a year. That's the average for 50 years, 4.7% on an average year. We had years where we went up 22, 24%. And as a result, we're now sitting at this high price point. And as a result, sales are still down a little. They're down to year to date about 3%, but they're steadily improving. So we're going in the right direction. Things are not getting worse, they're getting better, but they're not better yet. They're just getting better. And I think that's the qualification we got to put around everything. Compare the normalized number of 5% to 24%. It makes no sense. Somebody's got to get hurt. And what's gotten hurt is the low end. I saw some statistics yesterday that said if you're under $400,000, we're out of sight, versus if you're 400 to 800, you're in another market. If you're 800, $1.5 million, you're in another market. Those markets are fine. It's that lower end market where we're not building entry level houses. We're not doing that for two reasons. One is it's very expensive to build a house anymore. We put in so much as far as cost items to get a development approved that people are doing apartments, but they're not doing first time buyer houses, which we used to do in the 250 to 400 range. There's nothing new has come on the market in 20 years in that. Secondly, we've got this population implosion. We have to, this is not political, this is just a statistic. You have to have 2.1 children if you're a woman of childbearing age in order for the population to remain where it is, not to go down, not to go up. We're down to 1.7. So as a result, we don't have young people coming along in the next 5, 10 years like we did over the last 5 or 10 years to buy first time. So I think that's going to subside a little bit. Some of the industry, such as pharma, has depended heavily on immigration into the country, legal immigration, normal immigration, before 3.5 years ago immigration, where you came in and you're still coming in and you're coming in with a degree and you're going through the channels and you're going to work in some of the areas that need people. And right now, when you take a look at the, if you go into a Home Depot or a McDonald's and a help wanted sign hits you before you get in the door, there's no people at that level. They keep trying to pay more to get more people. But if there's no people, there's no people. So that's why we're seeing automation. I'm checking my own groceries. I'm ringing my own thing at McDonald's. It's amazing how they con you into saving them money.
Yeah, Joe. I wanted everybody to know that we're speaking to Joe Peters, because if they're listening on the audio podcast, they can't read what's on the screen. So you can call Joe. He will tell you what he knows, Joe. 908-304-4660 and jpeters.com. So I have to occasionally let people know that, because, as I always say, they can listen to us and enjoy the road if they're doing that at the beach or wherever they're doing.
You might be surprised I picked the phone up. If it isn't saying possible spam and a number comes in, to me it's a possible new customer. I love to talk to new people, so give me a call.
That's
We
true.
go for any of these subject matters.
You see, you can talk to Joe, but if you want to see Joe, you have to watch Casual Conversations because
There you go.
that's where you see him, what he looks like, and everything. So you can see him. But like I say, if you don't want to see any of us, you can just listen or turn your back to the screen and do whatever. Right? We don't care. So in any case, let's go back to the serious information.
Right.
Um, New versus old. All right, a home.
Well,
What is the deal with that?
it's like buying a new car versus an old car. A used car. We, in effect, in Hunterdon and Somerset County, aren't developing, as I just explained, any low-end housing. There's no housing being developed in any numbers below $1 million. $1 million is pretty high up. In Warren and Watchung, that's our average list price. But in Bridgewater, the average list price is about $700. In Clinton Township, it's about $550, $600. So we need houses that in effect can get the first time buyers into their first house, but at the same time can get the trade up buyers where they need to go. Now let's talk what a trade up buyer is. A trade up buyer is somebody that's already in a house, already owns a house, and probably has a very low mortgage on it. That's the big problem. He or she is probably sitting on roughly a 3% mortgage. Now the mortgages, as we just said, just came down to 6%, but they were up at 7 and 8. They're not going to make that move, so they're not moving, and that's what we're calling an existing house market, where people, let's say the kids are all gone, they're empty nesters. They do manage to come back, but it's quite a shock after raising a couple of kids, and all of a sudden there's nobody in the house. People say maybe we don't need this house anymore. And they take a look around, and I said, yeah, there is a house down the street that would be, we could stay right in the same neighborhood. It would fit our lifestyle a lot better, but it's going to cost me another $1,800 a month to move from here to there. And that house is the same value as this. They're not going to do it. Right. So a good example of what has happened just in this 1% drop since July 1st is very interesting. If we took a look at a new buyer, and I'm just trying to find this in my notes because I got it all written down. A first-time buyer, 10% down, buying a $235,000 house. That's an average for a first-time buyer. If
300? What is the average?
About 235, somewhere around 250 to 400. So we took the low end. We said he's going to put for 235. He's going to put 10% down. It's going to be 211 down, and he's going to finance the whole thing minus the money he put down. Just in 2 months, he can now afford a 285 versus a 211 after his 10% down. Really, gross numbers. He, instead of buying a 235, he now can buy a 309. That's $74,000 more in purchase price, just based on the interest level going from 7 to 6%. If this interest level goes down again, it's going to unplug a logjam that's going to be amazing. Now, a trade-up buyer, they typically put 20% down because they have a lot of equity in their property. We already said it went from 400 to 600. Unless they borrowed money against that, it's all equity, which means they have a lot of cash sitting in that. They would typically buy a 740 house and put 20% down. Now they can buy $1 million house for that same price. 2 months later. That's why they were waiting. So we're starting to see movement, and we're starting to see people out there making this happen. A trade-up buyer would have put a lower price house on the market, typically. Sometimes they don't spend any more, they spend less money on a new house. They're looking for a smaller house or a house in a different town where they don't need all the space they needed outside for raising the kids. So when we talk about a first-time buyer, they're typically looking at a 250 to 400. We have no inventory whatsoever at that level. When we're talking for a trade-up buyer, they're typically looking at a 750 to $1 million. And they're taking some of their equity, they're moving it over, and they're changing their lifestyle. And that happens. People buy a house maybe every 8 to 10 years. And the first time might be they outgrow the first house. They got more kids, they need more bedrooms. They trade up a little. The second time is when the kids are gone, and now it's time to trade down or right size, as we call it.
Yeah.
And then we talked, I think, last time about the 5 Ds that drive the market. And the first is diploma. Second is diamonds. Third is diapers. Fourth is divorce. And fifth is death, unfortunately. And those are the reasons people buy and sell houses. Those reasons haven't stopped. They're still going on. Yet we're selling a fraction of the houses we had sold in the past. And as a result of that is we have a backlog of business. That backlog is going to give us a great year in 2025 unless something goes wrong. Now, I'm just saying 25 is going to be active. Let me give you a couple of other things to consider. More retraction and remote work capability will happen in 2025. We've already seen this where IBM is saying to people, if you can't live within X miles of the office, you have to resign.
Really?
Really. I live in Clinton Township, right outside of Clinton, near Beaverbrook. And I've got people here that haven't gone to the office for the last 10 years since I've lived here, now are putting 2 and 3 days in the office at big companies. I won't mention their names, but they're requiring people to be back in the office because 2 things have happened. They have a lot of real estate that they have no people in. And secondly, they find people more productive in the office as far as creativity and as far as camaraderie than working home and remotely. So that's one of the other things that's happening. The other thing is we're going to see interest continue to go down. We're seeing it probably by this time next year, getting very close to the 5% mark. We're never going to get back to 3%. That was an artificial number. The government brought it down through quantitative easing. And in effect, we're going to see it lower and we're going to see more sales. We're probably going to see at least 10,000 units come on the market in the next year and more sales by at least 15. Remember I said today we're about 3% behind. By this time next year, we should be 12% ahead of this year.
Hey, Joe, I have a question, kind of go back. You're talking about first-time buyers and everything, but when you talk about rentals, you don't have enough money. Is there a formula over time or whatever, like how long should you rent before you actually consider buying? Because there's at one point you're throwing money away.
It's a trap because you're paying somebody else's mortgage. We put up, I think it was 36,000 rental units, or maybe it was 6. It was a lot of rental units. It's rescinded about 50% now. When you go into a rental, 2 things happen. You're probably spending just about as much money as you would if you were buying a house. But the excess money that you have, you start committing to other things. Maybe you have 2 new cars instead of 1 new car and just a clunker to get the groceries and to get to the train station with. So your equity position, you talk about the American dream. The American dream is putting 10% down on the house, but getting the whole house. And the whole house is what appreciates, not the 10%. So you got a lot of leverage. Let's say you buy a $50,000 house, $250,000 house, and you put 25 down. Well, if you only got equity appreciation on the 25, and you got 10% in the first year, you'd get 2,500. But if you're going to get the whole house worth, you're going to get 5 times that amount. That's the leverage factor of owning a house. And that's where the equity comes in. And that's what builds up over time when you own a house and doesn't build up when you're an apartment. And that's the trap.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is, if you can do it, you don't sell the first house, you buy another house and you rent that house. If that's, possible, then you've got recurring rental income plus the value goes up and you have 100% equity at a certain point. And then you're good. So it just people think, because I'm from a generation where people came in, with my parents from another country, and you think people can't afford homes and stuff, but back then there was no internet, they didn't drive, so they didn't have all these expenses. So they would buy a house and pretty much quickly pay it off, and the houses were, whatever price they were at the time, but or they would buy a 2-family house,
Well, and it's amazing because it's a foreign mentality. People coming into this country from other countries, I won't mention the countries, but I don't think it matters, typically think that way. I'm going to buy my first house, and then I'm not going to sell it. I'm going to borrow against it and buy my second. And before I'm done, I'm going to have 8 or 10 houses.
Mhm.
And that's the way people in Europe and people in Asia has done things over time. We don't think that way.
Yeah.
We think, first of all, we think about a lot of square feet. They don't think about a lot of square feet. A couple of other things that are happening. We're thinking more multi-generational. I think we talked about this last quarter. The kids are living with mom and dad because they can't put enough money up to find a house. They can't find a house even if they have the money. And now mom and dad are getting a little tired of the kids being there, and the kids are a little tired of it as well. So they give them some money to afford a bigger house. There's nothing wrong with that. And that's what's happening to a great extent. The people that would have been buying under 400 are now buying into the 500s and the 600s because of that. The other thing is people with large lots are looking at subdividing the lot and maybe putting a second house
Oh,
on
you're really close there, Joe. You better back up. You might scare some people who are
it.
watching.
Yeah, hey. I think there's one more wild card here, and that is the New Jersey economy. We are unemployment-wise third or fourth worst in the country. And as far as creating new jobs, that leads to the unemployment, we are not remarkable at all. So I think the New Jersey economy is a bellwether of what could happen. What we've always been afraid of for the last 2 years of this soft landing of a recession. But you look at the national level and the job reports that are coming out. First thing happens is they always get revised next month, but nobody ever talks about the revisions. Secondly, they find 818,000 that never should have gotten put on the rolls.
Yeah, where'd that come from?
Yeah, and nobody wants to talk about it. Okay, we're not as well put together in the job market as we should be. I don't think there's a recession right around the corner, but I think there are some concerns. And I think the election, once it's over, will make some of those concerns go away because we'll be committed one way or another. But I don't think it's going to change the real estate market. I think we're just going to all get back to our lives and put up with what we agree with or what we don't agree with. We spend a lot of time right now studying. I mean, and what do we got? 6 weeks left. And everybody gets up and looks at the headlines and looks at their own talk channel as to what they're saying about it. Once that goes over, we're going to have a lot of time on our hands.
Well, you're talking about people, being told to go back to their buildings wherever they work,
Right.
But that might actually help real estate because they might, on their travels, especially. I have a relative who travels about an hour every day to work at this point. They'll see like, hey, look, there's the whole new building going on. There's this railroad village going up in this town. Like look near us, how much build out in Hillsborough and Somerville and Bound Brook where you never considered it. So you see that and you're like, hey, this is a cool, I can live there and just jump on the train and be done instead of having a house somewhere and cut the grass.
Well, and I've said this 100 times over the last 20 years. I have worked out of my house since the 90s. And first I was in sales before I got into real estate. I was selling for large scale computer software manufacturers. And I didn't go to work, so I didn't put gas in the car. I didn't stop and buy a bagel. I didn't have lunch. I didn't maybe stop at the stores frequently on the way back. There's a whole bunch of people got affected by people working from home. Then in 2020, it was forced upon us. And everybody started working from home. Now, I can tell you from the real estate viewpoint, where we'll typically have a desk for every 5 or 6 agents in the office, you can go into a real estate office right now and you're going to probably have to turn the lights on. There's nobody there. You cannot do business working out of your house, but you can do business over the telephone and meet people at the conference room at the office or at a Dunkin' Donuts or a restaurant somewhere and get business concluded. So we've got a New Jersey job creation issue, the inflation issue. It's coming down, but the prices aren't coming down. The rate of increase is not going up as high. They're calling that inflation coming. I actually heard a newscaster on talking to somebody saying, well, if inflation is down, how come prices haven't come down? And nobody said prices are coming down, just the rate of inflation is coming down. Right. We typically go 1.5%, 2% a year. It's been that way forever, but we were going up 8%, 9% a year, and that's how we got to where we are. I don't see it coming back. Pick up a steak at the local grocery store, and I'll guarantee you, 9 times out of 10, you're going to put it right down back where you found
Right.
it. I mean, it's absurd what prices are.
Hey, Joe,
Yep.
get closer to the camera. I have an important question for you.
Okay.
Why should I hire a real estate agent? Why can't I just sell the house myself? Put up a sign and say, hey, I have a cousin who's a lawyer. They can help me. Why?
Well, we can prove to you that you will get less for your house if you sell it yourself, because you're not a negotiator and you don't understand the pluses and minuses of how a house is sold. But some people do that, and they're happy with it, and that's fine. And we call it for sale by owner, FSBO. FSBOs are 5% of the market. And FSBOs can usually be shown how they lost money by selling the house themselves. Secondly, it takes a lot of time. There are 154 steps in selling a house, 154 steps. And I'll just give you a good one that happened this week. We went under contract as far as we received the contract, we signed it, and we sent it back. Now we're in attorney review, and they wanted to inspect the house. I said, no, you cannot inspect the house till we're out of attorney review, because that protects both sides. It says I have to sell a house from you and you have to buy the house from me, unless these 18 things in the attorney review are broken as a rule. And people don't know that, and they're losing deals. The other thing that happens is emotions, and emotions are so strong. I can't tell you how many times I've seen somebody say, I'm not going to get out of the house. I'm going to sit in the backyard. Well, they're sitting by the pool. We're looking at the house, and the people like the house. And they say to the people as they go by, how long is it going to take you to get out of the house? And the person says, well, we haven't started looking yet. You never, ever want to have that conversation. Bang, deal is dead. They're thinking, I want to be in here in 6 weeks, and they know the other person can't get out in 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Buyer should never meet the seller to the closing table. And most closings are virtual anymore anyway. And we represent the buyer on one side, the seller on the other, and sometimes we're a disclosed agent and we're representing both. There are skills in that, skills that in my case have happened 400 or 500 times over the last 20 years where I've sold a house. And I can make those skills work for you. And that's why you pay me what you do.
Okay, Joe, I asked you this question, so I'm going to ask it differently. The question is, you come back over quite a few times on Casual Conversations. Why do you keep coming back?
It gives me a different type of exposure. I help you put together an agenda of what we're going to talk about. I listen to the last show so that we don't repeat it. People can go backwards and listen to the last show, and there's about 4 quarters in a row now. And I get a lot of hits. I get a lot of people who see me out there. And when I publish my newsletter on a monthly basis, there's a link to this podcast to hear about the third quarter's business. One of my specialties by default is seniors moving on to the nursing home or worse. And 6 of my last 8 sales have been that kind of situation. And 3 or 4 of them have come out of things like this or groups I've belonged to where I've discovered people that I would not have discovered in any other way. And I get nice exposure. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. You're talking about hits. I think you're a hit every time because you've got your podcast going, newsletter going. Casual Conversation might help too, as you said. So thanks again for your time.
Thank
Folks,
you.
if you're buying a house or you're selling a house, or you just need information about real estate, Joe is the one to go. Hey, that
And my
rhymes
number
pretty well.
is?
And his number is 908-304, right there above me, 4660 or jpeters.com. All that stuff I talked about is there. Links to the past episodes will be below this video if you're watching it wherever it is, YouTube, podcast. Cable,
Great,
you can't play, you link it. But hey, it's been great talking to you, Joe. One more
Same
time.
here. Thank you.
Bye.